So I am here with the one, the only Ezra.
Yeah.
I feel like Ezra is a unique enough name that you're probably not going to be confused by other Ezras. Although, if there were to be a space with multiple Ezras, it would be a space like this. Yeah. But you've been PVK has this term or had this term that he hasn't been using much in the last couple of years, but the term is Consciousness Congress. And the idea is that I'm going to put my own spin on his idea, but the idea is that your subconscious is much less a monolith, as in like Rider and the Elephant, Jonathan Haidt style, but it's much more a collection of agents, a collection of personalities, with their individual wants, needs, desires, hopes, dreams, all those things. But I think we also have we have the projected perception of the people in our lives, whether they're physical and it's not just people. So it would be people, but also like personalities in terms of like celebrities. So, someone who's a celebrity might be like the Pope, might be I might have a projected image of the Pope in my mind as a Catholic, where that projected image is influencing me and guiding me in some way, shape, or form. So it's interesting to think about the consciousness congress of someone's interiority, but then also the people that we come in contact with is influencing us. And in this space, it's very strange because I've never physically met you in person. And yet I feel like I know you somewhat, like more, I know you more than just as an acquaintance now. But I feel that way. And but the longer that I've seen you, especially participating with Grizz and various things, and it's like no, this person's rising in my consciousness congress hierarchy, whatever the interior or the exterior is. So, yeah. So thanks for saying yes, Ezra.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. Like the past 2 weeks, maybe, but especially this week with my rando going up or whatever. It's like I'm experiencing the parasocial from the opposite end for the first time, because entering into this space, there's a sense that I know the people that I've seen in their videos. But now there's this sense that like they know me, and then they're reaching out and talking to me and stuff. And I don't know if the too many grandmas thing. This has really been like the week of too many grandmas. So I think that was like a premonition, because I knew that rando was going up or whatever. And then it was like, yeah, now I have stepped into a room with not a million grandmas, but a Dunbar number of people who are like, waving hi to me, and yeah, so I'm kind of like navigating this for the first time, coming from relative reclusiveness of like a decade or longer.
Are you familiar with the parable of the sower?
Remind me.
Okay. There was a man who was walking, scattering seeds.
Yeah.
And as he was scattering seeds, some seeds fell on rocky ground and didn't spring up. And some fell on very rich but shallow soil, and they sprung up really fast, and then they dried up quickly in the sun. And others, so honestly, that's how I think a little bit about the Daedalus mythology. And the Daedalus mnemonic is this always the concern of flying too close to the sun and attempting to grasp or attempting to be something that we're not ready for. And my experience, because I can kind of talk you through what you can expect. So
Yeah.
But if you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, I find it's a really good analogy for this for this experience, and coming out of the lurk, so to speak. And yeah, no, I did not intend for like worldly news to come out on the same day
Yeah, right. Of
that you're
course.
random. Like, I did not intend that, but these things have a way of like synchronistically coming together so that God might be putting you in the furnace and be like, hey, you want other people in your life? Okay.
Yeah.
Say hello to my little 1 million grandma friends.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. That's what it's felt like. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So Gartner hype cycle. It's like any new product, I think any new principality. And in fact, it's a wave. And that's one of the topics I wanted to discuss with you is like, because I was thinking about this in relation to Ross Bird and Ethan Caughey's conversation. I think it's a really, really good analogy the more I think about it. But okay, the Gartner hype cycle is you have a new product, service, launch. There's a lot of hype. It's like, oh, this is going to be awesome. So you can think of like the early internet and I think we're almost exactly the same age. I think you're like 6 months older than me or something. So like the early 90s, or not even the early 90s, late 90s, when everyone was getting AOL, and I remember like net zero and like actual free internet during that time. And there was this, the dot-com bubble. There's a sense that like the internet is going to revolutionize and change the world. And they were right. They were just early. And then you hit the top of the Gartner hype cycle, and then it goes smash. And then it's called the trough of disillusionment. So right now you're in the peak of inflated expectations. But I think your incredulity is probably the right instinct during the peak of inflated expectations. And then you get to the trough of disillusionment, which is like, why did we ever even do this? Like, maybe you're already it's like this was not. And the thing about the trough of disillusionment, sometimes the trough of a disillusionment leads to death, and it's an appropriate death of whatever the power or principality is. Like, sometimes that's genuinely the case. But other times it's a necessity of like the 40 years in the desert or the 40 days of Lent or whatever. It's like, okay, this is going to suck for a while, and then it's going to slowly but steadily get better. In my sense of TLC, I definitely went through a trough of disillusionment after. I went through a few. I think like there was one after Midwestuary, like, and Chad deleted his channel, and I was just feeling down about because I love Chad, but inevitably, like, he had to scale back his participation in this space because they had a daughter, and he had other things coming into his life. So that was one. There was definitely one for me initially when I came out of the lurk. And you have this, like, PBK's term is like, you have the new hot chick in the corner, and you're, the new hot chick. And also, and there's always that new hot chick phenomena, but like, and this is a source of pride in me, which is also dangerous, that I pride myself on this, and I've gotten into trouble for this, and I could be wrong, but I pride myself on seeing if there's more beneath the surface to someone that's really worthwhile. And you are that glinting, at least in my mind, like you are glinting in the darkness, you could say. So yeah, and the fact that Grimm has been extremely elusive for good reason. I honestly think Grimm is deliberately the way he is because he's afraid of hurting other people, and his heart is worried about other people. That's what I think. And but I've noticed growth and change in many people in the TLC, and Grimm's among them. And I think what he's doing with you is really good, and I think what you're doing with him is really good. So take that for what it's worth.
Well, yeah, Grimm has this thing that every time you experience deja vu, that might be a save point. And so you'll have to return to this moment potentially, And I got a very strong sense of deja vu in the middle of the first PVK live stream that I jumped on, or that I was on. and but it was in the middle. So I was like, well, this either means that entering this space is like a necessity for me, but I potentially screw up after this point, or it means like I've been playing the game and I saved at the wrong time and this is all a mistake. So
Well, one thing about this space is that we are the people in this space are very good at practicing forgiveness, especially when it's like a genuine. So like I won't, you will mess up. You'll say something you regret, and you'll treat someone rudely that you regret treating them in that way. And the wonderful thing about life is we just get to keep playing. and
yeah.
and I honestly think that's the cheat code of being a Christian is like we know that we can be forgiven. Like we know that, like know it. And that's a cheat code where most people are like, ah, man, I'll never be able to fix that. And somehow we have this like reckless, ridiculous faith that like it's okay, it'll be fine, God will figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not so worried about the trough of disillusionment because it's like if you have if you have levels of cynicism sort of like deep enough, then which like I kind of feel like I've explored a thing of like the problem with cynicism might be that we don't go far enough because it's like if you really go all the way, then you kind of come out the other side or something. But yeah, so it's like you know I was pretty disappointed before Midwestuary. I was pretty disappointed, like being disappointed in advance of entering the space, and I think that has so far that has helped and been working as a strategy. you know
No, that's great. Like I have learned, especially I would say over the last 7 or 8 years, one thing I've learned, and this has gone hand in hand with my faith, without a doubt, is like the better I get at failing, the better I get. So the better I get at failing, the better I get. And like so if you treat everything with the presumption of failure, like everything, and then you say, okay, it ends in death and it ends in suffering, but I'm going to trust in the process. Like I started thinking about the kingdom of God as a process. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I get to play the game of the kingdom of God, whatever that is. So like I don't have that long. I probably got 40 years, to play the game. But like I'm going to presume it's a game worth playing, and I'm going to presume I'm going to fail regardless, but that's going to be okay. And you get really good at failure. And that's awesome when you get really good at failure, because yeah, it's like you get past the cynicism, and the cynicism is like, I'm going to fail. And it's just like, okay, let's go. We got things to do. Who cares if we fail?
yeah, for sure. I mean, that's and this is very much like I've almost developed like uh, failure's core to my entire philosophy of everything right now, and that goes into some things I've talked about, like the the degree to which the world is upside down, and therefore failure is actually moving up the true hierarchy. Failing in this upside down world, it's just a little bit of a spatial metaphor, but um that's certainly something I think about a lot. Although, like, an interesting question, I think, in Christianity, and maybe just between the like Bronze Age, Axial Age transition, is like the degree to which it seems like there could be a movement there of like the degree to which heaven is more real, how real heaven is compared to earth. Because it seems like it's unclear to me how far that goes, because you have a thing with Jesus and the Buddha that seems different than the organization of the like earlier Bronze Age understanding. And it's like, is heaven and earth the balance? Is that what reality is? But then what does it mean for heaven to be on top of that hierarchy? I still see this as like a question that seems to come up in the corner, and is coming up in some of the Christian, like Jewish conversation, where it keeps coming up, like the how real is earth, and how important is like earth and life on earth. And it's much more emphasized in Christianity and I think Buddhism, this like your earthly life is a little bit like it's the bottom of the hierarchy. Your spiritual life is the center, perhaps. And the and that's one thing that I'm questioning, because I'm very attracted to the I'm very attracted to like the this earthly life is nothing, and I'm concerned that would be where my mistake would be. That's where I would potentially be just like dissociating as a cope.
That's interesting, because the point that you're talking about is probably where I have the most friction with most other people in the corner, including some of my best friends in this space. This is the point of friction, and my temptation, I think, is the opposite side of that spectrum that you're describing. And I always think about this in terms of like my natural biases, because I am ridiculously industrious. Like, I'm not particularly orderly, but like if I'm not doing something, and this is, I think this was even before Peterson, but with Peterson, like I cranked this up several notches, where if I'm not actively pursuing a goal, I feel then the nihilism sort of creeps in, or I feel like I'm not being useful in some regard. Now, what's been interesting is, like, in my Christian journey, as I become more faith-filled, like I think about being more useful to other people than I do, or I'm thinking about that usefulness to others much more than just like feeling like I'm doing something worthwhile. Like I've noticed that the orientation of usefulness, how I define that, or like value, has pivoted to be more caring about other people, and that's people in my day-to-day life, physical life. That's people in this space. It's people in my church. All those things. But I will say that the point where I have the friction is exactly what you say. It's like, because Peterson has this idea of like, life could be meaningless, or maybe it's the opposite, where like every single thing we do matters. And I'm much more on that every single thing we do matters side of the spectrum. The problem with that approach is that there's no room for God, because if every single thing we do matters, then there's no fixing the problem. Like in order for something to matter, it has to have real consequences for other beings, for other agents that feel and experience, etc. Like, in order for things to matter. And so if every single thing matters, like absolutely, then those consequences for other feeling beings are absolute consequences. And that's also a temptation for me to like take everything way too seriously in that regard, you know. And so like, yeah, go ahead.
I would say that I really think that like we've made a mistake in how we've started to use the word matter, because it seems to me that the things that matter, like matter as in matter and energy, like the things that matter the most are made of matter, just mean the least, because matter is the bottom of the hierarchy and meaning is the top. So this like thing of like we've started talking about what matters to me, but it's really like like in a like in like in Platonism, there's kind of there's a trinity of the man, the lion, and the many-headed beast. Okay, the many-headed beast is the one that cares about what matters. Things matter to it. Okay, but the meaning is only for the man. The meaning is for like from the top, and then the lion is like a mediator between the two. So the spirit is like always the mediator in between. So I just noticed that a lot, and then it's like it's very. I just think it's very difficult for people to not frame things as materialists, but I don't. I don't think materialism is real. I think that it is as unreal as idealism, and that idealism and materialism together make something like idealism and something like materialism together make reality.
No, I think that's right, because in some ways, yes, the matter is that which matters least. And yet, it seems like the only medium that always restores us back to meaning or back to purpose or back to life in some way, shape is the physical. Meaning, if we never meet in person, face to face, like ever, that would matter to me in a not great way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this in terms of because this happens periodically where go ahead.
And like it, so just following through on what I was saying, like it's interesting that there's this sense that like the way I'm using matter is like things matter to me in the way that I have desires, and like that's coming from the body or the stomach, and the spirit is a mediator between that and meaning, and
there's the bodily stuff, which typically within, and I find myself believing and abiding in this more and more, the bodily stuff of like reducing the appetites, so to speak, being able to fast in all ways, shapes, and forms, and the value and the purpose of that. But there's never there is something in this is hard to put into words. There's something bodily consecrated in human relationality in bodily form, and I mean that in terms of two people meeting face to face. I mean that in terms of someone working with these remarkable devices that God gave us called hands. I mean that in terms of the smell of the air and the trees and the breeze and feeling the wind on your face and the sunlight and the rain beating down. All of that. There's something that's unmistakably consecrated about the meeting of us in bodily form and nature.
Well, and I think each thing that you described is connected to meaning. So it's like I'm just hearing that as that's the spirit. That's really the spirit of life. And that, so like, I think what I suspect is that, like the Buddha saw the indulgent life of just like trying to fulfill bodily desires. And then he hung out with all these ascetics who are just denying themselves of absolutely everything. So you might say that they're almost like completely dissociated from reality. It's like they're like, are they even living exactly? Like they're kind of dead in a way where they have all meaning and no matter.
The way I would frame it is in terms of self enrichment, bodily, like I'm getting from the outside what I need for the inside, and
Yeah.
treating my meaning, my value, my hope in like the next meal, the next sex, the next this, like treating that as like I'm gonna get, versus a reversal of that posture and a profound openness, and to say, I don't know what I'm going to be given, but I'm just going to receive in meekness. I'm just going to receive, and I'm going to assume it's good, and I'm going to search for the good in everything, but I'm not going to try to grasp or get or take.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like, I bring up the Buddha because the idea of like the middle way, that he saw it as a middle way between, indulgence and like total asceticism. And that implies that in the Buddhist framework that there's something wrong about like a total denial of the body. And that, in a sense, it's like a almost, you could see it as almost like head in a tyranny over the body versus the body kind of like in tyranny over the head, or like a kind of taking over the head there. And then, the Buddha is supposed to be like, well, these things are meant to be in balance, and this is in Christianity. There seems to be an analogy to the incarnation. But it seems like people outside of Christianity and Buddhism, and I'm using Buddhism in there too, just to bring in the idea that this seems like an axial age transition that goes beyond just Christianity, and it is in Plato too and stuff. But it seems like people outside of those systems tend to see the Buddhist or the Christian or the Neoplatonist or whatever as like the ascetics, as like the they're just like in denial of reality, and they don't see it as generative because it's like, well, if you're, and I think this is even how people sometimes view saints, is like, well, you're not having children, you're in contemplation 24 hours a day, maybe, like a monk, and people view it that way, as like you're just this ascetic. But and I feel like that's really intention, and it seems to come out too in like the one of the interesting things about the corner to me is the conversation between Judaism and Christianity, and it often it seems like that keeps coming up, where this sort of Jewish reaction to Christianity is like, you guys kind of seem in denial of this earthly reality, and like, and I'm curious about that. Yeah, that's just a thing, because I know that my bias would probably be to like dissociate from my embodied reality.
Yeah, most likely if you were born 800 years ago, I could see you having become a monk and illuminating manuscripts and being happy living out that existence. And that's unless you're born in very specific parts of the world today, that's not like if you were raised in Orthodox Christianity, you might have been, it's a Heideggerian thrownness, you might have been called to that. But we have I think most people are, no, this is so interesting in that I think an increasing percentage of people see themselves as having been born to the burden of the present age in the place, in the time that we're born into. And sometimes I think that way too. But I look at the present age and the thrownness of our current situation, and I do see it as a true blessing, as a true wonder and opportunity. We're living at a very unusual time in history. I'm convinced of that. It's a very strange time. I've almost thought about it in terms of, well, to go back to the wave analogy, I'll use a different analogy because I'll get to the wave. For countless eons, it doesn't even matter if you're a what is it, 6,000 young Earth creationist. It doesn't matter in what I'm describing if you're watching this as a young Earth creationist or as an believing in evolutionary the human evolution. Doesn't really matter for what I'm describing, which is we've lived in an age for basically all of human history of scattered peoples, of scattered cultures, scattered people. Now, those peoples came in contact with one another through trade, through war, through marriage, through other things, But in general, they were distinct, separate, scattered people. And for the last 500 years, we've had this deep breath of drawing all of those peoples into commonality, whether they like it or not. Everybody's drawn into commonality, whether they like it or not. And that was done through, well, first of all, through technology. It just wouldn't have been possible without technological developments to allow for better coordination. But that, in effect, it's almost like the building of Babel. Because they're all being drawn up so that we can translate each other's languages. We can work together. We have a common cultural language in the Blue Church, or whatever you want to call it. We don't call it Christianity, but we believe in treating the foreigner and the visitor with respect, and treat the other as I would want to be treated. And we just call that the golden rule. We don't mention Christ, and it's okay. And everyone can just integrate and trade in a global way and work together globally. And that has been the inhale for 500 years. And not to say that there's not countless and horrible abuses in that process, but in general, that's been the trend. And now I sense we're at the very early stages of the scattering, the very early stages of I don't really understand what that person is saying. And the scattering is not by ethnicity or country or race or even sex or gender. It's more a common map of how we see the world. It's an interior scattering, not an exterior scattering.
Yeah.
Those two things map. So the question that I've had is this is the last thing I'll say, and I want to talk about this wave analogy, but we could spend an hour thinking about it or talking about this. But okay, so a wave, the way a wave forms, it's really forms way out into the distance, way out into the distance. And so the way out into the distance would be the birth of Christ or something like that. And then when it gets close to its telos, gets close to shore, it's hitting something solid. When it hits something solid, then the wave grows. As a surfer, and I don't surf, by the way. So I'm speaking at this conceptually, metaphorically. But
we're on the same page.
As I understand it, the moment, being a good surfer is all about good positioning. I think it's about being in the right place at the right time, and reading the signs from far away, being in the right place at the right time. And then there's a few critical moments. There's a short window of time where it's particularly critical, where it's really intense, and to properly bring one's body, oneself in alignment with the underlying form that's both chaos and order. And though if you mess up those few critical moments, you're SOL. There's no way to catch the wave. But if you position yourself properly and properly align yourself to the wave, then you really ride that wave. And it's something like with the Renaissance and with the printing press and all of these things and the rise of Protestantism and all of that, that like we really caught that wave, whatever that wave, and we've been riding it, riding. But the thing is, like, after that short period of intense activity on that wave, there's not that much to do as a surfer other than maintain your balance. I think like it's just like the wave is consistent. You just maintain, and you can't like go faster than the wave. You can't like stop the wave. You can just kind of maintain. You could screw up. You could still mess it up, but like you can't do anything other than what the wave is already doing, so to speak. You're just sort of riding it out, and then obviously the wave ends at some point. And then you got to look for the next wave. There was one last thing I was going to say in regard to this, which is like, I think a lot of people, I think that wave analogy is in every pursuit of life. I think it's in everything. I think it's in everything from like marriage to family to body, church participation, body participation. It's like everything. And I think we're at a moment where a lot of people are confusing like the riding out the wave with like the necessity to try to like reinvigorate the wave, and it's more so a question, I think, of like the other waves that are in the vicinity and are related, and figuring out how. Anyway, that's a lot, and I'm sure I missed some stuff, but go ahead.
Well, it's interesting to like a thing I've been thinking about a lot is there's this clip from Midwestuary that is when PVK and Vervaeke are talking about Job. They bring up Job, and Vervaeke sees Job, the book of Job, as this story that's sort of about the Bronze Age, Axial Age transition. Because before the Axial Age, it's, if things are going bad for you, it's just because you messed up. It's, this is the ideal world, and the gods are kind of just right. And then, in the clip, Vervaeke is like, but we learned that that's not true, and that's part of what the book of Job is about. And that, and then he even gives an example, like we learned that that's not true because of Auschwitz, and like this is his example. And I just really doubt this entire interpretation of the book of Job and the idea that that's a good example, etc. Because like jumping off of what you're saying, I hear that idea, and the broader context of that conversation is, Vervaeke is saying that we're going through another transition like this. And PVK asks him, like, and what will it, be to be good? Like, what will the good be post transition? And they're talking about this dynamic in Job where it's like the friends that come to comfort Job. It's like in a sense, they just have this view that's not helping Job. That's like they have an idea of what the good is. That's basically like the outcome means that you were doing good, and the bad outcome means you were doing bad, type of thing. And then that definition of good changes somehow in the Axial Age. And, and then PVK is like, so what's the definition going to be? And Vervaeke says, I can't tell you. It's too huge of a task what you're asking me to answer. I can't tell you because, we're not on the other side of the transition yet. And my intuition is that all of that is wrong. And that what's going on is the transition that he's sort of talking about is, and like maybe even the way he's framing the Axial Age is something like the wave, and the Bronze Age view is something like the view from the shore or something. It's like these waves just come and crash, and it just goes in a cycle, and that's just the way that it is. And if
Well, it might be. I've been thinking about it in terms of like there's just an underlying tide of like so the tides might be powers and principalities, demons, spirits, whatever you want to call them. So as the breathing out happens, then we all just kind of as we're disseminating from that wave, we're all just doing what's right in our own eyes. Now, it's not to say that there's not an objective truth, an objective reality that transcends all that, but just saying that the spirits, that the underlying tapestry, that's topology, that's the underlying topology that's under the ocean in that place, takes precedent where there's no wave. Like that's, and then people just sort of migrate to what they're most
like what I'm hearing, I guess, is that what I hear in what you're describing with the wave is just the in the in breath and out breath, and it's just like we've been writing this we've like been doing this in breath, and like the out breath has begun. I think that's really what I get from that story. So it's like we're telling this story about the axial age transition, but it's like that just seems like an in breath out breath thing, where the Bronze Age is either the in or the out, and the axial age is the in. Maybe it's like the out and the in, and it shouldn't really be a mystery then what will be the good in the next age. And I don't even really think that the definition actually changed, and that part of what's going on in the book of Job is like, did it actually change? Because it's this weird, like, depending on where you're standing, it looks a little bit different. But like I'm very influenced by the Tao Te Ching over the last couple of years, and I see that as really related to the to Christianity and Neoplatonic Christianity, and just my fundamental kind of theology that I have.
I love the Tao Te Ching.
So it's like,
go ahead.
It just seems like again, it's this like yin yang and the Tao, like and that's heaven and earth and the spirit are very similar concepts. And so I'm just very doubtful of like like I guess I see that like trying to keep the wave going is part of this like fear of that transition. But even that though, like there's a little bit of a question, because you can frame the wave as like life itself, and then it's like, well, we do want to keep it going, but it can be you're making a mistake, because are you just talking about yang now? Are you just talking about something without the relation that's needed between the two things to give it life?
Yeah, I think the way I think of the wave is the way I think of Tom Holland's Christianity. The default set of assumptions that, like, so everything from the proper way in life is marriage, one man, one woman. Everything from treat your neighbor as yourself, as you would want to be treated. Everything from like what are some other default assumptions, like civic participation? Like participating in that nested hierarchy of civic participation, from like local governance to state to all these things. And I do see the old gods, like the Bronze Age stuff, coming back. It's just in a different form, but it's conglomerating based on like human personality, if that makes sense. So people who have similar values are conglomerating around their god, whatever. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. And
Yeah, it's like I'm just not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm like getting it.
what's
Being able to
interesting.
wrestle-
What's interesting about that is like there is still like a baseline set of assumptions that we're playing by. Like if I drive up to McDonald's drive-through, like they don't say like, "Are you on Team Red or Team Blue?" They're not doing that yet. Like they're not. So like the baseline set of human assumptions would be something like the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
So like everyone
Yeah,
has their own god and it's okay. Everyone has their own god and they disagree. But like as long as you have a god and they know what tribe you're in, then the Roman Empire can let commerce flourish and the economy as like the meta god can continue being the god that we define human existence around.
Well, yeah, and do you think that like uh like Matthew Pageau has this thing of like uh, Christ is the key, but we've forgotten the lock, and he's trying to kind of recover the lock. You know, basically, that's what I think of this supposed transition, where it's like uh, the or even like the paganism of Rome or something is like, and then you get all this stuff of like that paganism and Christianity are like completely incompatible, and that just one is just the entire reality or something like that. Whereas it seems more like, well, no, one's the lock and one's the key, because like the idea of like everybody just worships their own god, like, well, that's just people have attention, so obviously there are a multitude of gods, like potentially infinitely many gods, but
Yeah.
but so there's like a relationship between that between those two, and it's just interesting because I think one of the reasons that this conversation about Job struck me was because I had kind of my own relationship with Job, but it was being read as like a critique of the Bronze Age towards the Axial Age, and perhaps that is when it was written and part of how it functioned. But for me, as the modern person encountering this story, I actually used it to reconnect with a more Bronze Age, perhaps, point of view, because uh, it's like part of my transition into a belief is, is things like it's through doomerism in a way. And so, is it axial or bronze to believe that, if AI kills every person on Earth, that is divine judgment from God?
I think it's more bronze. And the reason is that God has given us his promise that he won't do that.
Yes. But it's like
Now, I used to take that Genesis like 10 years ago. If somebody would have said what I just said to me, I would have said like, that's a ridiculous statement. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. It's not. But the difference now is like,
it's not like it doesn't bother me. It's just like it's the function of if and like how we frame things, because it's this thing of like, to me, you need both of those. I'm not actually sure that you can actually function without both of those, because it's like there's a naive form of each of them that denies the other. Because when I say, if, every living thing on earth is destroyed, by our pursuit of artificial intelligence, then that would be divine judgment from God. Then it would essentially be like, well, we would have, undone somehow the sacrifice, and thus the punishment would fit the crime. And to me, that is a kind of faith that is like potentially necessary and can live with the faith that that won't happen, because it isn't deserved, not that it won't happen because it can't happen or something like that.
Sorry, Ezra, can you hold on for just one moment? I'm going to pause it you can take a bathroom break. Okay, sorry about that. So we were talking about the need to keep both Bronze and Axial Age in tension.
Yeah, I mean, insofar as that's the right description of what we're talking about, but because even the idea that that won't happen, like that doom will not occur, is an interpretation, and
well, there's different levels of doom.
Yeah.
And so this is something that we don't like to face, is that, like doom is inevitable. This goes back to like the previous conversations. It's inevitable for me. It's inevitable for every family. It's inevitable, I think, for maybe every institution. I have weird thoughts about that in relation to the Catholic Church, which is maybe like the last, remaining, if any institution survives. But like doom is inevitable. Like God killed 3/4 of people in Europe during the bubonic plague. So like we panicked. We panicked because 1 or 2% of the American population was dying from COVID. Like we basically threw all of our freedoms away for that. So like what level of doom are we? That's what we're not contending with, is like what it means to have a certain level of doom.
Well, that makes me think too about this thing where like many of our terms, many of our words shifted definition over the last 1,000 years. So like doom, or several thousand years, like perhaps with a Bronze Axial Age transition, because like doom meant fate. That's what it meant. Then it came to mean something like judgment, and then it became associated with when the judgment is against you. Right? And I see in that the same dynamic of like riding the wave. I become very concerned perhaps about, the doom, like the judgment being negative toward me because I'll be the one dying or whatever. But perhaps from a different perspective, or like the shoreline, whatever, you're just like, this is just fate, man. And, one of the things that came out of a huge thing that came out of a South Estuary for me was the idea of trust your doom, which is to say, trust your fate, divine fate, and but even that statement and why that would be so important to me is perhaps in the way that it bridges this sort of axial bronze distinction. Because if I have faith in my doom in that way, like perhaps I'm having faith in both senses.
In Catholic terms, it's memento mori. Remember your death.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And but do you think that bridges those concepts to an extent? Or are we just axial age people, and then there's going to be some new age, like Vervaeke says, or or is axial just right, and like we just need to stay?
Well, I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. I keep going back to Frodo and Gandalf, where Frodo says, I wish the ring had never come to the Shire, or I wish this it never happened. I forget. And Gandalf said, so does everybody, but it's not for us to say. What's up to us is what we do with the time that we have. And I'd like to look back at my life, at the end of my life, and say to the Lord, hey, I played the part that you gave me to the best of my ability, and I pray I did okay. Because I think of the parts that were given, we don't get to choose our role in the story completely, but we get a fair bit of creative license within our role in this story, and the orienting principles that we go by. I think they matter, and they play themselves out over the course of our life. So yeah, but a part of playing the game is knowing where you are, where you're going, what's happening. So like you said, even though the truth and the goodness and the beauty doesn't change, and those orienting principles are transcendent and eternal, the lay of the land and where you need to go in relation to those principles certainly changes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like, do you think this is the best of all possible worlds?
I don't believe in something like a meta universe where there's like infinite. I think this is the story.
That's
I think,
what I think.
yeah.
But in that sense,
yeah.
it is
Yes.
the
But
best and worst of all possible worlds because it's the only possible world.
Yeah, I think that's right.
All right.
I'm not saying that there's not another story that comes after, and there's nothing. Yeah, but I don't know. It is a tension. I was thinking. Sorry, to take this back to the wave analogy. I was thinking about the surfboard, because the surfboard is like in that wave analogy. It's the psychotechnology, and it's also the technology. It's both of those two things that are allowing us to properly ride the spirits. And it's the difference between like us thinking that the surfboard could be motorized, and it's like, oh, we could go wherever we want, versus respect where God is bringing us.
Okay, you remember when you brought up a forbidden planet when you were talking to Grizz?
To Grim, yeah.
Have you revisited Forbidden Planet, or like, do you remember
No.
Forbidden Planet well?
Not well. I watched it when I was like 12 or maybe 10. Like I was a kid.
Well, it is a fascinating film, because it is the entire basis for Star Trek. Completely. But if you watch it, the differences in Star Trek, which will come out like, I don't know, less than 10 years later, I think, the differences are extremely jarring. And it also has some interesting, just like, you could also just watch it and think about Peterson as the Morbius character, and it's interesting. But what's very interesting is that, you have this planet where they achieved this technology that was so advanced that anything they thought could become real. And it destroyed all of them. Okay. And then you have this sci-fi movie about this, and like literally the culmination of the film is, well, we've learned something in finding this society, and we will remember this in the future because mankind will get to this same level, and we will have to remember that after all, we are not gods. Last line of a science fiction movie is the importance of remembering that we are not gods. So it's a very interesting sci-fi movie, and something about it being, I believe, in the late 50s versus the 60s, and it's like a totally different uh, uh, view.
Well, something happened in the 60s, which was very interesting. Um, I like to think of this in terms of masculine and feminine, which makes people somewhat uncomfortable. But I think it's the right
I just say
dichotomy.
yin and yang because
Yeah.
then people like don't attach as much.
Yeah, but okay, which one's masculine, which one's the yin, and which one's the yang?
I believe yang is
Yeah, yang,
masculine and yin
yang.
is feminine.
Okay.
Unless I've been thinking about it wrong for like 5 years.
Well, there's something about one of those two halves inspiring the other, and the other half edifying the other, or and it's back and forth. And I think, especially since the 60s, with music and film and all those, like we've taken all these new psychotechnologies, and the 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 goal, I don't know how to properly put this, the masculine has inspired the feminine with all these technologies. Like the music is going to unite the world. We're going to bring everyone together. We're going to, beauty, peace, hope, and love, and all those things. And films about the transcendence of the masculine spirit, or Broadway is a good example of this, where like you have the conflicts, you have the problems, but at the end everyone's on stage and they're singing in unity, and they're all like they're all like marching into the promised land, basically. In like everything is resolved, and they live happily ever after. And we've done this with like various psychotechnologies in the secular realm for the last 100 years, but I think it really amped up a notch in the 60s. And I think there is diminishing returns to those psychotechnologies. They're not, because they're almost like hypnotic in mesmerizing, or and so like
yeah. Okay,
so go ahead.
Just yeah, this is interesting because the whole idea of like the motorized surfboard, to me, like in Forbidden Planet, that would be this machine that can just make anything real. But so the temptation is like to try to become as gods or whatever. But I think that there's only one place that we can become as gods, and it's in dreams. When, like, in a weird way. Okay.
Video games.
Well, just
video games do that.
Well, just where you can create, any, it's like a lucid dreamer, and it's interesting because that means, if you can do this, like it just means it's not real. The only way to do it is you can't, because it's not real. And it just seems to, this is something I've been thinking about, is that we live in a more and more of a dream world in that way, like using those psychotechnologies. But it's like, that's why it's mesmerizing and hypnotic. It's like, well, yeah, we've fallen in love with sleep, with, which I think of as the spirit of
that is related to the matter that we were talking about, the non-physicality existence of sleep.
Yes, yeah. And like the only place that you can completely manipulate matter at your will to do anything is when you're asleep, and it's not even really matter, yeah. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but that's just these are some of the, this is something I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, no. As my faith has See, it's very hard for me to measure how much of these things is causal with the other in my consciousness congress, because they're correlated within my own phenomenological experience, but I don't know causes. But I could say as a correlation, as my faith has increased, or as I that's the simplest way of putting it, is as my faith has increased, or as the things I care about are less focused on what I'm experiencing as what I'm receiving, and they're more focused on like what I'm giving or what I'm providing, um, then the abstracted nature of what I care about has diminished. Meaning, like the video game world and the meaning that that provided me, and how much I loved video games, that has diminished substantially. And my love of the physical and the relational things that I know, hmm, yeah, it's mainly like people, um, things that I know that are, yeah, I don't know how to describe that. I'm still trying to flesh out why things like video games or movies, or even the current even like good movies, like good movie, some of it's probably just maturity, is like a really good movie just hits me less hard because I'm more fixed in my frame of reference in things I care about. Like I'm not moved by, yeah, thoughts.
I think that like when films were invented, the only comparison that anyone could come up with were dreams, because only in dreams did people experience anything like editing, where it seemed to kind of cut in time to like a different place or a different thing that was relevant, so I see films and dreams as like, in a way, that films are like other people's dreams, or a kind of collective dream or something. And I think that it's possible that all art is this, and media is and mediums are
I,
this.
I think art is the in between physical reality and the dream.
Yeah.
I think that's the in between.
And I followed a lot of what Mathieu has said about dreams and sleep, which I find interesting. It occurs to me that symbolically, kind of following that, this kind of symbolic uh, logic, or whatever it is, or symbolic language that him and his brother have developed, it seems to me that the purpose of a dream, okay, or a good way to think, maybe it's just a good way to think about it or frame it, but like the purpose of a dream I see is to renew the spirit. Okay, it's like you go to sleep, and sleep renews your body, and it renews your mind in some way. But then what are dreams? Like, what is the point of the dream? And the fact that the symbolism of dreams is about the relationship between the head and the body, and how it breaks down in sleep. And some dreams are about it breaking down and then reassembling and waking up again, but a lot of them are just about it breaking down. And that's why we dream that our teeth fall out and all kinds of stuff. It's like after I studied that, then I was talking to people about dreams, and they're like, "I had these dreams, my limbs were being separated or whatever," and they're like, "Well, that's actually normal. It's creepy, but that makes sense because you lose control over your limbs in sleep." But so I've started to think of dreams as having the purpose of renewing the spirit, renewing the relationship. That's how I see the spirit, is the relationship between the head and the body. It goes in between. And so, you know, uh, so art's really, art can be really, really important when you need that renewal. And I think that should be the point of it. You know, I don't really think that art's about, renewing even your understanding, or like an intellectual idea like propaganda might try to do. But so I think I experienced the same thing where it's like, well, dreams are really important. It's like in Jungian analysis. Dreams are really important when you are uh, impaired enough such that you have sought out Jungian analysis. It's like now your dreams might be really important because there's a renewal of your like spirit that's needed. But if the spirit is like going on all cylinders, then to like lose thousands and thousands of hours in a sort of dream world of media is that it becomes a kind of death in itself.
Yeah, I think very similarly about sleep and dreams. So if you think of sleep as a restorative rebirth process, you would expect that dreams are doing something for your mind, if it's necessary. What I've found in my own life is that when my axioms are stable, when I'm doing okay or I'm on the right track, I almost never remember my dreams. Almost never. Or if I do, it's like fragments or things that I don't feel are particularly meaningful or important. Um, but I found dreams to be useful in two different veins of life, or two different, yeah, I'll call it, one is the vein of life where I know something needs to change, but I don't know what. Where something is off or wrong, or I'm thinking about something improperly, or I need to basically, I think dreams are, this is probably Peterson, what I'm going to say. It might be Jung, but because I've read a ton of Jung after Peterson. I read a ton of Jung, but that the dream is trying to, I think it's Peterson, that the dream is trying to communicate as best as it can the thing that you need to know, that the thing that is important. But it's doing it in symbols and images and feelings, um, and yeah, for me, I've had some dreams which are indicative of the need to change, and then I've had other dreams that are indicative of it's going to be hard. That's like the second category of, it's not that a change is needed any longer, or a certain uncertainty. It's more so that like it's it's preparing the land for the reality of the future, whatever that reality is. Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah, and as like as an art person, as an art weirdo, uh, I've become more I guess it's like I've started thinking that like I remember my dreams every night. I wake up and I remember my dreams, but I do not and I usually write them down, if but not like obsessively, because you could have like a phone or something right there so you can always get it down right, and it's like I don't think that that's healthy necessarily, that level of focus on them, and I don't like think about them all day trying to unlock what they meant. But I just naturally remember, and then if they seem relevant, I will usually write down whatever it seemed was going on, and occasionally refer back to them. But I think it's like I've become fairly convinced that this is something that it makes sense for me to do as someone who has this role, and that you know the this role can be important in a non-fallen way, but it's used, it can be sorcery. It's like the magician. Like, is there a I mean, icons are art as well. There is I believe, a non-fallen version of this thing, but obviously if you're putting people to sleep, in a sense, and then you know, meddling with their spirit through this like spiritual realm of media. You know, I mean, I think so much of it is mind control, so much of it is mind and body control. You know, and so yeah, so I've just kind of more and more thought, well, maybe this is why I do this, and I'm taking on a risk and hopefully navigating this well for the benefit of others. You know, like a peripheral character for the center, or a you know yin serving yang kind of a thing.
So your relationship with film is in your childhood years, the way you talked about that with your parents was my relationship with video games, with computer games specifically. And yeah, all my formation is in like, and the key difference is the agentic nature, like the viewer versus the participant. And the in a video game, before you as you begin to play a video game, and you're doing this in a film too, but you're basically placing your trust in the creator of this thing and saying, like, I don't know the journey, I don't know the end, but I'm trusting it's worthwhile to participate in. And in a film, that's your attention. In a video game, it's your attention, but it's also the capacity to make decisions and fail. Like that's the interesting thing about the video games, the capacity to fail. And then how the game structures failure. Like, how much are you penalized? How difficult is it? Like, is it rewarding enough to keep you going, even if it's, is it too hard and you just get discouraged and you stop and you get demoralized? And I think the way that films are emblematic of dreams and reflecting something about our human condition, that is the best films, I think, are almost eternal in that way. We could talk about Titanic. I increasingly think Titanic is like, there's a reason it made $2 billion. Like I really do trust the crowd in these things, and it's a worldwide phenomena. But with a video game, I think it's a little bit closer to life than the dream, because your decisions have consequences. Like there's video games wouldn't capture attention without the but what's interesting,
that's funny, because I would think of them as being perhaps the most dreamlike medium we've created is the video game.
Well, maybe lucid dreaming.
Maybe, maybe. But just because it's agentic, and that is like a dream. I'm an agent in my dreams, so my dreams are more like life in that sense. And a game much more creates the world, which is like it creates the dream, and then you dream it in a way. Whereas the film has like a layer of abstraction. Although some of the best films, I saw OG Rose talking about this idea of like cool and warm mediums, and that in general, film can be like a cool medium because it does all the work for you, and you kind of just like sit back. But the best films don't do that. So like the best films are like on the warmer spectrum of the media. Some of my favorite movies like don't do hardly any of the work for you, and so some people are just like, why would you ever watch this? But yeah, so I think that but yeah, it strikes me that video games are in a sense more dreamlike, and my preference in video games, although I'm not the most avid gamer and I haven't been for several years, like I sort of stopped playing at a certain point, but a lot of my favorites were the most surreal, like I had experiences like playing Metal Gear, the Metal Gear games, that were like transformative and psychedelic in nature. Did you ever, like Metal Gear Solid 2? There's
Yeah, I think that was a PlayStation thing, and I was a PC guy, so I never played it. But I had plenty of friends that did, and
well, yeah, it's just like in Metal Gear Solid 2, they end up doing things like shut off your game console because it's like you like the fact that you're playing the game becomes a meta aspect of the game, and then they're like telling you that it's dangerous what's happening and you should shut off your console right now and just stop playing. And it goes to like the game over screen, but the game over screen shows like a little window of you dying, but you're actually still playing, and it's like faking you out and just like breaking your whole concept of what the game was and how it functioned.
wow, yeah.
So, but yeah, these were all like very dreamlike things. And then I also see video games as closer related to sleep, because it's like it's like I'm dreaming when I'm playing. And so if I play all the time, it's like I'm asleep. But then of course there are interesting differences, because it can be like a collective dream and we can all play at the same time, but that's also like the Matrix. So I'm very interested in where you're at with games now, because I know that now you're making games, and I haven't heard you question like it seemed like you're still determined towards that end.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you were saying that they've like lost some kind of a personal function in your life.
They have to be a means to an end.
Yes.
They cannot be the end in and of themselves. As a teaching medium, I'm always hesitant to say that any technology or any phenomenon, especially a mainstream phenomenon, is completely irredeemable all the way down. Like it is, and
did you always feel that way about games, though? Like,
I mean, they were my first and truest love. Certain games, yeah.
Like, was your relationship with them always connected to sort of a means to an end?
No. Well,
like
it was
itself for a period.
How I got lost in stories the most were games. So I can give you some examples of like as a teenager, young teenager, I would say like 12, 13. I was introduced to, so there are games like Civilization, which PBK apparently played as one of these. I started on Civilization 2. And the idea of Civilization is like you are leading a civilization from 4000 BC up to the present age. And you have to discover technologies and build cities and build roads and farms and all those things. And you have to make decisions, and your decisions have consequences. And you can play the game worse and you can play the game better. And worse and better is like, worse would be another civilization comes along, sees that you're weak, and gobbles you up. They invade and you can't stop them. And better would be that you could do the same, or you become a trade powerhouse. And like, and the best games have multivariate strategies and opportunities for victory, if that makes sense. Like multiple ways to win, so to speak. But one definition of a game is you have one or more players participate in a shared arena, and they have asymmetrical outcomes. That's key, because if the outcome of every player is exactly the same, then it's like, what's the point in playing? Now, women think of games very differently than men in that regard. And my daughter, like, she is designing things. She loves designing things. It's not about winning and losing. It's just about creating or making, and so like the winning is like, oh, I started with a blank slate and now I have something that's beautiful, and I've edified it in some way, shape, or form. Whereas the competitive nature in masculine games, it's like, no, I'm going to be awesome at this. Like there's a system of rules. One could call it life. One could call it the tax system. One could call it a religious dogmatic framework. There's a system of rules in a game, that you can get better or worse at, and you can master. You could become really good, and then you can rise up the game hierarchy. And it's not even, back then it was innocent because there wasn't the social media, and it was just like, oh, I love this story, or the challenge of getting better and better in this thing. The challenge of getting better and better in this thing in and of itself is a meta skill that has paid for itself over the course of my life, because then you can get better and better at the next thing and the next thing. And it was this realization that games are an approximation of reality, because right now there's the game of this conversation between you and me. Now you could say it's not a game because it has consequences, and I would say that's right, but the game is, and like I said, an approximation. But because you can learn through a practice, through an approximation, you can learn how to do something that's more real, meaning the consequences and the meaning, but also, the consequences are more real. Then the game is a great teaching tool because it is that approximation. But if you think about all of life in this game framework, you have the game between Neal and Ezra right now in this conversation. You have the metagame of Neal and Ezra as a long-standing, or as a relationship, let's say, that's just beginning, and who knows how long it will go. Maybe the rest of our lives. We don't know. That would be wonderful. So the metagame of like, how do we play this? And you could think of it as a dance even, but it's the repeating games. And then there's a broader metagame of this, like, not a thing called TLC, which is how can we play the game in such a way that is not hurtful or damaging the broader framework of this broader internet community that we're part of, internet based, but also physically instantiated in certain places. So, but how can we play the game both during this conversation, but in all the conversations we have, that's edifying for the community as a whole? And then for the TLC as a whole, it's like, okay, how can I play that game in such a way that's edifying, not just for the people within TLC, but also helps me to be more edifying, like helpful in building up people in my local life, and then onward and upward we go. So it's this ironic thing of like, there is a competition, but the competition is mostly like friendly within, because we are competing for attention and stuff like that. But ultimately, the competition from within cannot supersede. Actually, that is the deciding factor of what makes TLC versus like Christian YouTube. So Christian YouTube is like the competition to, like, what they would say, I'm going to steelman Christian YouTube. They would say, I'm bringing as many people to Christ as I possibly can. And if I climb the attention hierarchy, that's just all glory to God. And you know what? They're probably right. And thanks be to God. Let them play that game. And for whatever reason, the people in this space have said, and I think this is the deciding axiomatic choice, like within our hearts, like the underlying philosophical framework underneath it all, we have said, I don't trust my motivations in playing that game. Like that I'm more trustful of my motivations if I'm bound primarily by people I care about, that I actually know personally. I care about those people personally. And those people are actually loving people such that they have what's best for Neal in mind, such that if I exhibit, behavior, if I'm doing, and the same thing goes for my normal, my physical life, but if we use this framework to make ourselves better in all aspects, and we don't try to achieve an outcome so much as we trust in whatever spirit is guiding us or whatever's beyond, so that's how I think of games in relation to what we're doing.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that, and I agree that, like, I would describe it as the TLC is like, it's focusing on the spirit, which, like, I have this thing where I started I started trying to understand everything in terms of the interrogatives, because it's like, I'm trying to interrogate reality. I really abhor, like, overly complex, like, systems of thought or something. Like I've said before, like, as a poet or something, I love words, and every little weird word and its specific kind of impression that it can make. But as a philosopher, I effing hate them. I hate words, you know? So I got down to like the interrogatives where it's just like, okay, why, how, what? Okay. So all those, so a Christian YouTube can be united in their why. We know why we're doing it, and all that matters is why we're doing it. I'm completely skeptical that this can work. That that the overfocus on like why at all costs is, to me, a kind of is not distinct from materialism, which is like what at all costs. I see the TLC as a how focused community. We're going to do it in the right spirit. There's a how you do it that's more important than, and I wouldn't say that it's more important. Like it's a little hard to talk about because why might be at the top, is the top of the hierarchy. It's why you do things. It is like your telos, but how is the mediator between your telos and reality, like what the material world, and how it becomes instantiated. So the idea that it's not that how matters more, or, it might matter more, but it's not that how is more important than why, but it's like without how, there's nothing. It's dead, whatever it is, And I definitely, this is my framing of the space to a large degree, and why I'm like, this is the space. And that it's kind of like there's nothing else going on but this.
Everything else seems to be, or the default standard is. I was talking about this in relation to Mark Jackson regarding walls, meaning like the wall of your thing has to look as pretty as possible so that you get as many, like where we seem more focused on the interior than the exterior. That's the genuine, yeah.
Well, and I kind of, if this is the out breath on the like global cultural whatever, I see this as it can be a little hard to talk about because of navigating the dualism non-dualism aspect, but I believe that like the spirit of life is this right relation between life and death, with heaven and earth, yang and yin, and the spirit there is the middle. It's the mediator, and it goes in between them, or is a way to think about it. The spirit of God hovers above the waters. That's where it is. It's in between heaven and earth. Okay. But lost my train of thought there. Sorry. What were you saying?
Well, I was talking about TLC, but we could, okay. I could pivot this because Tayo and others will get mad that I'm navel gazing again.
Sorry.
But I could pivot this in the specific challenges that I'm thinking about, and the specific challenges that I could use help with, and that I don't know how to address on my own. So when I came out of the lurk 3 or 4 years ago, it's been a while now. I think it was like no. It was only 3 years ago. It's 2023. One of my first conversations that was with more than one person, it was with me, Chad, and Tayo. I don't know if you met Tayo. He's not as active as he used to be. He's British, but anyway, and I said, well, I think what comes next is the art layer, and that's how I ended that conversation. We never really talked about it, and because you have a founding set of ideas that make up this space, like a founding philosophy, and there are actually a myriad of, it's almost like a meta philosophy that's made up this space, and there are some principles, but they've never been codified, and I think that's somewhat the magic of this place, is that they haven't been codified. I know Chad's talked about from time to time that it could be codified in like a 12-step or something, but I think I don't want to reduce it down. It's
Well,
anyway.
you can't codify the Tao. The Tao that can be
Yes.
codified is not the true Tao.
Yes. Yeah. So okay. So so what I mean by the art layer, like at some point we run out of ideas. And the reason we run out of ideas, like you could have infinite ideas, but the problem is like something within us, this is our subconscious or the right brain, whatever you want to call this, but something within us has found certain ideas particularly salient, important, useful that we can apply. Why? Yeah, so that's the question. I kind of answered it. Why are certain ideas more salient or important? And it has to do with the fact that they're actually useful. That it's not enough to just receive God on top of the mountain. We have to come down the mountain into physical instantiated reality. So like in 2016 to like during from that period from 2016 to COVID, it's like all the ideas for so many people that are now active in the space are like boom, 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 boom. Like our previous axioms just blown apart. What it means to be a Christian, like what it means to be a good person, what's the purpose of life, like all of those, like the previous instantiations of what I believe, like my axioms were really rocked. Like, but then at some point after the rocking through ideas, then the realization of like, man, I need to talk about this stuff with other people. Like I can't, like you can get pretty far on your own. I'm pretty like introverted, self-motivated on a lot of things, but then it's like, okay, what's the next step? Well, obviously it's other people. Like obviously it's other people. So then we've been talking about these ideas with other people, but then it's like, we're still kind of rehashing the same ideas over and over and over and over and over again. It's like, well, what's next? And obviously what's next is like the instantiation in physical reality post ideas with other people. But it's like we're not like building a compound in the mountains yet. And like what's the in between something like physicalized, instantiated in space and time as like, this is the church of TLC. We're not doing that. What's the difference between like the pure idea, the abstraction, and the church of TLC that's not a thing? And it's the art layer. Like that's where art lives. It's the liminal space. It's the creative space. And so what I'm really thinking about is like, I love the creating and the building within Unreal Engine. I took this up as a hobby after COVID or during COVID, because I had this idea for a story, and it's morphed completely. Like the story is not important. What I realized with the story was like I was going through the Jungian individuation process, and like where Jung would have done his where he would have asked people to draw mandalas. Like for me, that was a story. Like my mandala was a story. And as time passes, where I'm more comfortable and self-assured in my identity and who I am and what I want and where I'm going, that necessity of instantiating that story in physical reality has become much less. But also, as my distance from that original story that I wrote in like 2018, 2019, as my distance from that story has gotten further, I'm able to be more like I haven't really analyzed it that closely, but when I have gone back to it, I'm like, there's a lot of chaff here that can be burned up, but there are pieces of gold that like because I was going through what's called in Jungian terms would be called a creative illness. Like it was a period of explosive creativity for me when that was like 2017, 2018, 2019, but like a lot of chaff, like a lot of bullshit that needed to pour out of me. And
I have 30 albums of that, by the way, available on streaming.
Yeah, no, but I'm sure amidst all of that, there's gold. And the hardest, and as I've gotten, actually, like what I've really gotten better at over the last 5 years, I would say, or 6 years, is like the editing and like the figuring out what's good and what's not, and how to bring it together and how to consolidate it. And like I could feel every worldly news episode I do, like I'm getting better as like an editor. Like I know like what's too much and what's too little, and like where to put things, and like I can feel it now. Maybe that's just like self-aggrandizement and just pride, but like I can actually feel myself getting better at this. So and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I really agree, and I remember what I was going to say earlier. It's about this thing of the the wall you were talking about, like making the wall that's beautiful on the outside versus the interior, and viewing TLC as a spirit, like as something that's more united around the spirit as opposed to a why or what, and that's why it's like a no thing, and that's even kind of funny because it has like a Buddhist actual sound to it, the no thingness and non-self, and those are similar ideas in the East there, um but that is how I view it, and I view like the last couple thousand years, or the last 1,000 years, as in a sense the beginning of this out breath. And I would say that like I see the development of modernism as like the increasing separation between why and what, where there's no middle, there's no how. So you know science becomes completely abstract, but then it can go so abstract in that it like has no way to instantiate itself, which is like working on abstract physics for 50 years that has nothing to do with life on Earth or something. And so I call that the spirit of, it's really no spirit. It's just the spirit of no spirit, or the spirit of no middle, or the spirit of death. Okay. And, part of why I'm attracted to this space is because it's like, well, this seems to be a space that's really how focused on the spirit, which is the exact thing missing. It has unified around this thing, that was missing. And then it also, I think, makes sense. There's been some talk lately about like Pajot and Vervaeke and people that used to be kind of the core of the TLC, broader TLC. And then it's like, well, they've gone behind paywalls was one idea. And so like maybe that's why we're not really seeing them anymore and clipping them. But Vervaeke does come out behind his paywall, and so does Pajot, and I hear what they have to say, and I think the issue is more that they say the things that we already know that they think. They're still telling that story.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's good in the sense that a lot of people haven't heard that story and they will need to hear that story. But it's like, well, we've already heard it all. And, Vervaeke early on was talking about the importance of the arts. The arts need to come in and take on these ideas. And then I went to like a Vervaeke online thing and I tried to participate, and I was like, yeah, like where's that part of it? And there isn't one really, because that he doesn't see that as his role. And
yeah, and it's because it's hard, and this is why I'm firmly in the PVK corner of the corner, like and PVK is much more horizontal than vertical in that he's drawing people together and bringing people together, and so in this body that the reason why I care about this body so much is not the body in and of itself. It's simply because I've met so many people within this body that I now consider friends, that I now love, and that I talk to daily, and even if it's just like dumb signal chats or, 20-minute conversation with Chad or like whatever. I talk to people within this body all the time now, and it's a core part of they are a core part of my identity and my consciousness Congress. And so what I'm really caring about is like, and they care about each other too. It's not like we have a single node that's PVK and everyone else is like only connected to each other through PVK. That's the wonder and beauty of this space. Is we broke the YouTube algo, which is very much node centric, where you have a single node, and then you just have, gather as many people together around that mountain, that single node.
Shorts, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, build, yeah, exactly. Like you want to see shorts. I'll just stand up, you know. There you go. You got shorts, okay? So you make a short out of that. And they probably will. Anyway, the the real question for me, like what the remarkable thing is, like the mountains connected, like the different nodes connected, and that the different nodes care more about each other than, like I said, than they're rising to prominence. So then, okay, if that's what I care about, if that's what I genuinely care about, then what I really want to do is I want to increase the trust. I want to increase the trust of the node, the people and the nodes within the network. Like I want to strengthen that relationship so that, and it's like, okay, how do we strengthen that relationship? And then the way we do that is we have to do things together. That could be in-person events, could be virtual participation, it could be like live streams, it could be I have a silly idea for Worldly News and I ask for as many volunteers as possible. It could be that we work on a group project. But here's the key. Here's the key. And this is actually what separates a cult from everything else. Like, what is the force that compels people to participate? Like, if once you get mammon involved, and this is where I think Luke has a strong point, because once money is involved, then it's like, man, things can deteriorate real quick. And at the same time, like, I am making a video game. A few of us are making a video game that we do hope makes money, and we're aiming to release it at the end of this year. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I have no idea how to do something that's, how do I say this? In order to make money, you have to draw boundaries. But then the question is, like, how does the boundary become permeable or able to be accessible by other people in such a way that they can also participate in the process? The mammon makes things almost impossible in a egalitarian manner. And so, like, I'm much less worried about mammon, because, like, right now there is no money, which is good. Thanks be to God, you know. But at the same time, like, it is a pipe dream that I could just work with my friends on creative projects and, like, derive a living from that somehow. But right now, that's just a pipe dream. So I also don't think it's what God is. I also don't think it's what God has in mind.
I see, like, it's like we have three strands kind of going on here, because we have the specifically this space, you know, and specifically these people. So, then you can talk about, like, the spirit of this space and these people. And then I think, if we start to talk, like, ambitiously about TLC as more like an idea, we're moving from talking as much about the specific people on this specific space, and we're kind of like picking out something. We're going, there's something about this that's actually needed at scale. But it can get a little confusing, because then it can be like, insofar as you're talking about that, you're talking less about the particular people and like the immediate, and but I also think that it's important to talk about that more ambitious side of it, or that, like, what could TLC be or become. Like, that's good for talking about when it's like this, we don't do anything, but what are we doing? It's like, well, you need to understand that, like, there's something to be done that could be done, and what that might be. But then understand that, like, in a sense, that is separate from these individuals, because if you start talking about some ambitious thing that no one here could do, it's not useful.
Got to aim small to start.
So it's like we're talking about, I think we're talking about both of those things. And then I also think that there's an aspect where the idea of the things we make together or the ways we participate together, like one of the interesting things about how the space seems to have evolved is that, like one interesting thing that it seems to do is it seems to take mediums that already exist and it's like trying to baptize them in a way. And so it's like, reaction videos are, you know, a can be a pretty mammon gross medium. They're not the worst. It's not that bad of a medium, but it can be. Uh Certainly. It can be like tabloid, But this space, it like took the reaction video and it started to change into something else. And then if now there's kind of this idea of like, well, there's less to react to, and like, do we just keep reacting? And I think that there's a sense in which it's like, well, one of the cool things about this space is that we started, or people just started clipping each other, right?
Yeah. I think two
And the
things.
projects we make together, and then
Yeah.
like if somebody makes a big project and puts it out,
Yeah.
even things like the Grizz show and I mean, these are extremely powerful creative things
Yeah.
that come out of this space, and then yeah,
Lot of thoughts. The things that hypnotize us, or attention, or convince us that X or Y or Z matters. I think those things are getting weaker. The reaction, the reactive stuff is I think it has strength so long as the principality that's holding someone in bound. So let's say reacting to U.S. government stuff. So if you feel tightly bound to the U.S. government, then you are then beholden to the reactive to the U.S. government stuff, whatever, to your U.S. identity, or if you're on the hedonic treadmill, so to speak, you can increase and reduce the latency of every hit of that down to like 3 seconds. Maybe 3 seconds is too long, and you swipe. So we eventually hit a bandwidth limitation on the hedonic treadmill where, there's just no further in just our biological reality that we can that we can get. So I think we're running that out to its logical conclusion. I don't know what comes after. I suspect I know, which is Mr. Luke Thompson, the person is what comes after, because the person is that which is infinitely deep and complex, because the person is not even unknown to themselves. And what motivates us and causes the forces that both motivate us and have moved us and changed us are so remarkable. And it's a reason that like Jungian archetype stories have just failed utterly. And you have to reduce the archetype down to an actual person. And if we have so many fantasy stories, so much ridiculous nonsense fiction, like an infinite amount of meaningless fiction, the solution to that is like, no, this is a real person. This story is a real person. And it really happened. This is how it happened. And let me tell you, he actually raised from the dead on the third day. Like, so the actual person, I think, is gonna make a comeback, and we got that in spades. And so my other YouTube channel is called Newman Brothers, and I've had it since before my involvement in TLC. And when I was starting on my game development, when I was starting learning game development, and this was in like right around COVID time, like 2020. And I was starting to learn this stuff. And I was thinking to myself, like, I could make a game, but like, no one's going to care about what I make. Yeah, I could do it, but like,
it's just so weird, the convergence.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about and the timeline, it's like I was like trying to do a band, and then I wanted to make a movie, And the further I went in that process, the more and more, given that timeline, the more it was like, who could this possibly be for? Because of the way the culture is like shifting. It was just like the kind of movie I'd want to make. Who would watch it? I don't understand, you know?
We
So
have to
continue.
reduce, we got to reduce the abstraction down to the specific. The more specific, the better. That's the conclusion that I've reached. But yeah, so I started learning Unreal Engine and how to make games. And I found, thanks be to God, I was pretty good at it, at like scripting logic. B, that I really loved it. I genuinely enjoyed it. Like, it's something I would keep doing even if no one cared. Like, it was just fun. Like if I was more a tactile tinkerer, like if I was born 100 years ago, I'd be like, oh, I'm just like building shit in the lab, like Thomas Alva Edison, the namesake of the town I grew up in. But he was also kind of a jerk to Tesla and other things. Anyway, that's another story. But like just like trying things out in a game engine and experimenting and like building things and like I just love it. It's so much fun. And like I realized that it's not that big of a jump from like the kid playing Minecraft. And there's things in Minecraft where you could do like redstone, which is like electrical circuits almost. It's not a big jump to like move from that and the logic that's in there to something like a game engine. It's not that big. And the thing about a game engine is like it's far more broad because it gives you frameworks for things like lighting, for physics, for it gives you a framework for things that you don't have to worry about so much. You could just like you could tweak the parameters. You can have like really low gravity or stuff like that. But anyway, and then as I was like, I'd written this story and I was working on game development, and I was thinking to myself like, well, no one's going to care about whatever I create. But then I realized like, well, there is one other talent I have. Like, I'm a very good teacher. I'm really good at teaching. It's like, again, a source of pride, but it's like if God has put me on this earth to do anything, one of those things is teaching. I really feel that way. And so I in my job for many years, I had taught physicians how to use software. They don't want to be in front of a computer. They want to see patients. And I'm really good at communicating complex ideas in simple terms and like concretize, like, this is why it's the best. And so I like, oh, I think I can. So, and I noticed at the time, this was like 2021, that there were tutorials on YouTube on how to use Unreal Engine. And there were kind of two veins. There were people that were really good communicators, but you could tell like after a little while, they didn't know shit. Like they were, and then you had other people who you could tell they really knew their stuff, but they were not natural communicators. They weren't like compelling or interesting. Yeah. And I was like, well, I think I know Unreal now better than like this first category. And I think I can communicate better than the second category. So what if, so I did that, and it was moderately successful. Like I got up to about like 10,000 subscribers, but I hit a certain point in building the game that I wanted to build, whereas like I had completed my individuation journey and I knew that I didn't like want to be a slave to that series or that channel. And simultaneously, like, I was coming out of the Lurk with TLC, and these were the people that like I wanted to be associated with. Like I liked these people, and it was more important to me to be with people that I thought were genuinely good people who were interesting and caring about the right things. And so like I put a lot of that on hold, but like on the side, I just kept doing game dev for fun. And now we're doing it's mainly my work, but there are a couple other people helping me. I'm doing a new series, like how to build a game in a year, on that same channel. And it's a much more humble enterprise, because I've learned a lot over the last 4 years, and like aim low, but like it could still be interesting, but aim low enough that it's achievable. And my genuine hope with this series that I'm doing is that like people are inspired to like invest 20 to 25 hours to really learn the basics of something, like enough of the basics. Because the thing is, like, AI is really good now at answering questions about a specific feature or a specific option. But the problem is, if you don't know like the bare minimum set about game development, you don't know the questions to ask, you don't even know like how to begin. So you need a starting point. And that's how I'm thinking about this series, and we're doing one episode a week. And it's going to be like 50 or a little bit more episodes. And then at the end of the series, and this is the secret, at the end of the series, the very game that we're making in the series, we are releasing as a $2.99 simple game. But it's kind of, so imagine this, that you build a car. Imagine you build a car, but you don't put the chassis on the car until the very end. So you build like the entire framework. You build the mechanics and like how the car works. But you're like, is that a Taurus? Is that a Volvo? Is it like, what is it? And then you put something onto the end, and it's like, oh, it's that. And then that's the product that we're releasing. Is we put like and so we'll see how that does. But then after that, like, my plan, and I started like memberships because I was hoping to get like paid members who would want some extra tutorials and some Q&A. Like I was hoping people would be willing to pay like $2.99 a month in order to basically just have like they have a question about something and they need help, and I'd be happy to help them like with Q&As like once or twice a month. And we have like 10, I think it's like 8 or 10 subscribers, which is enough to pay for StreamYard, but that's about it. Which is, it's something. It's, some people are appreciating. And but so the question that I have in my mind is like at the end, and here's the thing, like most people don't want to invest 20 or 25 hours in someone if they can't see the final product. So we need to actually release the game at the end of this year in order to show like what the Volvo is. It's a Volvo, ta-da! No, it's not a Volvo, but we need to show it. And then I think it's possible that the series takes off because people can see the final product and they're like, oh, I want to actually build that. And I know in the process of building that, I will learn the basics. But the problem is it's like a 20 to 25 hour sacrifice of like actually doing the work and like doing the work of learning a new skill, which is tough. But that was always my goal, is like and it's a free series, like it doesn't cost money to do, but I think it's on par or as good or better than anything I've seen paid or free online in terms of like how to learn how to build something. And now after we release the game, like then I have sort of a fork in the road. The few of us, we have a fork in the road, and the fork in the road is something like, do we have enough paid members to keep doing something on that YouTube channel as a series, or that make it worthwhile for me to continue spending like quite a bit of time to actually put these episodes together? Or does it make sense to just focus on our next game or game dev project and not worry about the channel in terms of teaching, because the series and the basics are already there with the original series, with the series I'm releasing now, and just focus on like building the next thing. And I already know like a semblance of what I want to focus on and build. The question is like, is it worthwhile to also teach it? And I don't think I'll get the paying member base that'll make it, in my mind, worthwhile to also teach it while I build it. Because the amount of time it takes to like put together a good episode, edit it, like all that stuff is, it's sizable. It probably doubles the amount of time, maybe even triples the amount of time it would just take to like build and test and make sure things work. So that's like the concrete reality of what I'm living and doing right now. So
I have a lot of there's a lot of connection there for me, where I translated outside of video game dev. I mean, I made video games in HyperCard on my Macintosh in like the early 90s. But apart from that, did you ever use HyperCard on an early Macintosh?
No, I wasn't a Mac guy, but
yeah, my dad was a Mac guy because he did graphic design. So like, we had like the earliest, like the first Macintosh or something, and there was this program called HyperCard that was basically like PowerPoint almost, but it's like you can click and then it starts a series of animations and then you can present. So you can make these like simple button games where
But the thing I love about Unreal, there's a few things I love about Unreal Engine, and one is that it's totally free. You need a decently strong computer to run it. It could be a Mac, but but it's totally free to use, which is the way they make money is developers who use their system have to pay a royalty for games sold
Right.
with their engine.
Yeah.
But it's actually completely free to experiment with. And they also make money like selling assets that they develop. And what I mean by assets is like a 3D building or a 3D furniture or whatever.
It's like I'm translating a lot of that for myself into like I've been studying recording and mixing music for like 10 years. And it's very similar where, there's an unlimited number of YouTube videos, tutorials, but the same dynamics that you described are present in them. And it's very rare to find people that could actually communicate kind of a first principles approach to understand well what you're doing and do it well. And that tends to be behind paywall or just very rare. And the same thing with filmmaking, I would say, although I didn't learn that through YouTube or anything, and in both cases, I've thought of, oh, could I like teach this instead? But the problem is like I was far too punky to be able to get good enough that or something that I would. I mean, maybe I could teach it without being good at it in a sense, but yeah. So like as I developed my recording and mixing skills, I would like rebel against what I perceived as some kind of tyranny in my spirit, and then I would make these improv albums where we break every single rule that we could think of how you should do something. But it seemed to serve some kind of spiritual purpose for me personally, so I've stuck with it. But yeah, but it's interesting, those timelines and the sense of the journey of trying to become to master the art form yourself. And I see maybe behind the scenes some dynamics going on with the telos and the why, because like you get interested in something because you just really love it, or you loved doing it as a kid, or you loved escaping into it, but then you become a more spiritual or serious person, and then it's like, but like, is this just for mammon, and then the world is increasingly decadent and disturbed, and then you're like, am I just gonna make like one of these kind of games I hate, that makes all these kind of sacrifices to things I don't believe in, etc.
See, and where Grimm comes in is that I would read Grimm's story as a book. The problem is, like, I don't know a lot of it, but the problem is I don't think it's best as a book. Like, I don't think Grimm thinks that way. Meaning, like, sure, I think the video game medium would be a better way of conveying like relational images and experiences, and
well, and it's funny because I think that earlier when we were just talking about the dynamic with mammon, and this is something I think of as like, I think I have a different personal, maybe, like I don't have much of a personal story with Peterson. I like, it's very small. There was something there about the masculine and the connection to Jung that I didn't have, that was very meaningful to me, but I was never like, I was the Vervaeke guy. Like Vervaeke was my guy. But since then I've thought of the Jordan arc as like people looking to this guy to be like, he's the guy who's going to show everyone how to be super mega famous and like also be in the spirit or be good. And then the story has played out, and it does not seem to have succeeded to people in this space's satisfaction. And I actually, as we were talking, I was like, well, I really see more of the answers to that question currently in the Grizz show. And that's where I see it being most mediated and played out. And currently, and this might be the place we have to be currently. It's like currently it's, you know, an ironic grift. It's the inversion of Mammon. It's punk. It's whatever. And
It is truly punk, and
yeah.
that's why I love it. I love it.
And it's like I just really, you know, that's been my thing so far, or one of the only things I've talked much about in the corner is the idea of the degree to which the world is upside down. You have to fail. Like it has to be punk in that way that it's like you're being a punk in this world, but you're actually for the center, the true center.
Yeah, the original punk was the shaman dancing out in the wilderness on behalf of their tribe.
Yeah. And I think of that a lot, you know, in the punk towards the center, because obviously a lot of punk does not. It's just towards annihilation or something. But
well, that's it. Like there's a divide within punk.
Yeah.
That is the poking to redeem and poking to destroy, and
yes.
more than poking. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it's just yeah, that's where I see it playing out, and it's like it seems like part of the thing to navigate as part of a more ambitious goal or project is, you know, the degree to which you can commit to that and then be creating something that is actually good, and whether or not that's successful in this world, you know, it's like a don't store up your treasures on earth thing. But I also think it's part of how I see the dynamic playing out of like, you know, can these mediums as part of this decadent reality be in some sense baptized? Can, you know, can there be a new, I call it the cosmic background religion? Like, can there be a new background spirit of the culture? And if it was going to originate somewhere, I'm not saying it has to originate with literally these people in this space, but if it doesn't originate from a space like this, where would it come from? Like it can't be Harvard divinity unless Harvard divinity becomes like this again. You know?
I think about it much,
or for the first time becomes focus, like this, perhaps.
Yeah, like I think about it. Focus on the agentic. It's like, what else do I have to do that's better to do? I got nothing better to do.
Dude, I was doing very little before.
Play this ridiculous game with lovely people.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or ask me about or anything?
No, this was a joy. Yeah, we've gone over 2 hours, so probably a good time to shut it down. And I don't burn out in the sun, Ezra. Yeah.
Well, this has been a a recuperating week, as I have been trying to absorb the number of grandmas that are now in my life. So
well, someone once said that the bounds of his love are sufficient for 1,000,000 grandmas. So I hope that you stay associated with that person.
As do I.
And thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next time.